Good morning. It is 7:42 on Sunday, August 13th, 2017. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. And it is Sunday, which means that it is time to continue my rewatch of Avatar: The Last Airbender with the episode Season 3, Episode 10? Yeah, I think so. The Day of Black Sun, Part 2. No, 11. Episode 11. The Day of Black Sun, Part 2. The Eclipse. So, when we finished the previous episode, Aang discovering that the Fire Lord was not in his chambers, and in fact that the palace had been abandoned, the whole inner city, wasn't looking good for the plan. Nope, not good. Not good at all. But we're given a little bit of hope at the beginning of this episode because, of course, when Aang returns much earlier than everyone else expected, but with the bad news, oh no, they're not there. They figure out that everyone must have known the attack was coming. And of course, as we discussed last week, Azula found out about the attack from the Earth King in Ba Sing Se when she was disguised as one of the Kyoshi warriors. So, what's the plan then, right? Like, they've got everybody there. You know, is it too late? Should they abort? Well, they discuss it, right? You know, they talk about whether it's better to just try to get everybody out safe. And, you know, in hindsight, maybe that would have been a better plan. But that said, you know, Hakoda, Katara and Sokka's father, makes the case that, you know, everybody here came here to try to give us the best chance to do this. And so if there is any hope left at all, then they kind of want to see it through. So, you know, I mean, that's fair, right? They knew they were risking their lives. But of course, it's now a very dangerous situation because if, in fact, they did know about the invasion, then that could easily mean, well, first of all, they conclude the royal family and the Fire Lord might be in an underground bunker, which turned out to be true. But they also know that it's possible that their assault so far does not represent every bit of the Fire Nation's army and could be more dangerous. And as we see by the end of the episode, of course, that's true. But so we have a lot going on in this episode, but we're mostly focused on Team Avatar and Zuko, going back and forth. So let's stay focused on Team Avatar here at first. So Toph knows that she can use her earthbending senses to detect the location of a hidden bunker. And in fact, she does. She discovers a large metal structure down in a volcano, which, you know, just raised engineering questions in my mind of like, you know, I know they're firebenders, but still, are they just having to constantly dissipate the heat? What about during the eclipse when they don't have firebending, or is it going to overheat? But it becomes obvious that the show doesn't really care about those details, which is fine, really. In any case, so they are able to pass through tunnels to reach this bunker thanks to Toph's earthbending, and then they reach a huge metal door, which ordinarily would stop them, except Toph is earthbending superhero who has invented metal bending, and she is able to punch through the door in a very satisfying way. And in fact, Sokka declares, "I'm so glad we brought you onto the team." And so they make their way through. There's a funny bit where they get into the bunker and they see just this random Fire Nation guy, and just he's like, oh no. And they prepare to threaten him, and he's just like, "Oh no, the Fire Lord's chamber's that way." And gives them precise directions, and then just keeps going on whistling like, that never happened. I'm gonna pretend I didn't just do that. Although it's interesting retroactively to wonder if that was all that it seemed, because of course we learn that the Fire Lord is not actually in that audience chamber. Azula is waiting for them there. So was that guy really giving up the Fire Lord's location? I mean, obviously, did he know that it was a trick? Hard to say for sure, but he didn't act like it was. So we could very well imagine that, Azula and Ozai arranged that without necessarily telling every one of their underlings what the plan was. But in any event, they reach that chamber, and instead of Ozai, it's Azula. And she reveals to them that she had known about the invasion all along. And she's also, kind of amused to confirm that the Avatar is in fact still alive. But of course, we know that this is just about the time of the eclipse. So this is, the eclipse is starting, so they confront her knowing that she's not able to use her firebending against them. And they immediately try to press that advantage, right? And say, tell us where the Fire Lord is. And Toph points out, and I'll know if you're lying. As we've established, she can kind of sense heartbeats and stuff like Daredevil. But not with Azula, apparently, because in kind of further confirmation that she's really not just a bad person, but actually probably a sociopath who just doesn't feel human emotions in the same way that most people do, which leads to her being able to easily lie without giving off the normal sorts of biological automatic signals that most people would. And so they discover, oh, that's not optimal. And then, of course, they realize that because she anticipated being powerless and therefore brought Dai Li agents from Ba Sing Se that were still loyal to her, and so now, using their earthbending and her own natural agility, they find that she's very difficult to capture. And Sokka, ever the strategist, is the first to realize that, oh wait, she's stalling us. She's keeping us going after her instead of looking for the Fire Lord, which, we realize pretty quickly that is exactly what she's doing. And on the one hand, you sort of feel like, well, if you could capture her, that would be useful, but at the same time, if you can't catch her, the Fire Lord is probably not going to be easier. And I don't know. We'll have to see. It's not obvious that the Fire Lord has much in the way of fighting abilities without his bending, but we never really seen him do anything. But the idea of, oh no, we're stalling, and Sokka figures that out, but then Azula is able to bait him with news that Suki is prisoner, or, is it truth or lies? We know that we haven't seen Suki since she and her Kyoshi warriors fought with Azula, and given that Azula showed up later with the Kyoshi warrior uniforms, it sounds like it didn't go well. So it seems very plausible that at least Suki was defeated, and we can hope that she's a prisoner, but it sounds like she's not been having a good time. So realizing that it may be true, Sokka is unable to resist, and in fact almost rushes right into Azula's dagger, but before Toph is able to restrain her at last. But unfortunately, now it's like, okay, they've got her trapped, but it's, they're running out of time already. So let's see. So by this time, with only a very limited amount of time left, they've wasted it all dealing with Azula and all of that. And Sokka kind of initially sort of tries to say like, "Oh, I wasted all our time," except it's not all on Sokka. Although to the extent that it was his realization that she was stalling them and then continued to let it happen, we could see that. But we also, I don't think any of us can really hold it against Sokka at that point. I mean, we can understand his emotional reaction. But, of course, the eclipse is only 8 minutes. And once it runs out, Azula is easily able to escape once she has her firebending back. And then as the kids are now in a position of like, should we still try to find the Fire Lord now that he has his bending back? And this is, again, where we come back to Aang is not fully realized as an avatar yet. Not only did he never learn firebending, but his ability to use the avatar state is currently blocked. The whole idea here, the only thing that made it seem at all acceptable that he would face the Fire Lord in the condition is that the eclipse, and if that's over... So the kids convince him to withdraw, and that's where they come back outside and realize, oh no, the Fire Nation indeed had anticipated all of this, and so they have not only the airships that the Mechanist had designed, but their own new and improved ones, and they're prepared to bomb the evacuated city that now only has the invasion force in it. And so yeah, it becomes a full-on retreat, but the airships go on to bomb the submarines, and so cutting off the invasion force's escape. This is not looking good for anybody. And so Aang is definitely feeling like he's the one that let everybody down. And it's not untrue, not that I think we can put too much blame on him. It was a difficult plan and really wrecked by the fact that they didn't know that the plan was anticipated. So, in any event, the decision is made by Hakoda and the other soldiers that better the rest of the force be captured and the Avatar escape than for everybody to be captured and maybe killed. So... if the rest of the invasion force stands down and lets themselves be captured while the Avatar escapes, then that's kind of the sad conclusion of the best possible remaining outcome. So, Katara, Sokka, Toph, and Aang take on a couple of the younger people as passengers. So we get Haru, Tio, the Duke, all get onto Appa, and they fly away. And it's kind of a sad thing, because it's one of those things where, as much as Hakoda kind of tries to put a nice spin on it, is like, you gave us a taste of victory, and it's like, yeah, but all of our soldiers are now imprisoned, and even if that doesn't necessarily mean death, it's not going to be fun. And how are you going to wrangle that kind of force again? And yeah, this invasion seemed like everybody's best hope, and now that's gone. So, not looking good for anybody right now. Not for anybody. So Aang determines to take everybody to the Western Air Temple as a place of hopeful safety. And Appa can fly faster than those impressive airships, and so Azula cuts off pursuit, figuring, what are they going to do now? They'll need to come back eventually. And so lets them go. But of course, we finish the episode with the reveal that one person doesn't cut off pursuit. It's Zuko. So, let's talk about Zuko. Zuko gets some great stuff in this episode, including a moment that I feel like is one of the greatest moments of callback and catharsis in any show that I can think of, honestly. We knew from last episode that he was planning to leave, but we discover, in that episode, it seemed like he was planning to leave without ever talking to Ozai. But no, in fact, he was actually just waiting for the eclipse because he knew his father's wrath was going to be dangerous. And so if he wanted to be able to make his father listen to him, he had to do it during the eclipse, when he still had his sword abilities, because after all, his time as the Blue Spirit meant that he spent a lot of time fighting where he refused to let himself use his his firebending because he didn't want to be outed as a firebender. So he confronts his father and basically just says everything, which is that, like, everything you've ever told me about why you do anything is a lie. You know, we grew up hearing that the war was about spreading the greatness and of the Fire Nation to the rest of the world, but now that he has seen the rest of the world, he knows how much of a lie that is. He also just chastises his father for saying, you know, like, everything that you know, you say that you burned me and the duel and banished me to make me learn respect, but it didn't. For one, you know, it's like it was cruel, and he was a child, and it was basically everything that we've known about the Fire Lord all this time, but that Zuko himself was in denial about. And it's so great to see him finally have come to that conclusion. And it seems that, like, obviously everything had been building to this for a long time, and we had that moment back at the end of season 2 where we thought that it might have finally been the last straw, but you know, he gave in to the last little thread of hope that his father could really still love him. And then it was only after attending that war meeting and realizing the only time his father even tolerates him or appreciates him is when he doesn't act like who he is really. When he realizes that anything that he actually has to contribute is not appreciated. And it's only when his father thinks that he's done things that he didn't really do, and when he acts like someone other than himself, is the only time that his father shows him any kind of affection at all. And still not even really affection, but just like respect. And it's kind of neat to see that Zuko's decision is made not at this moment of crisis, but just in that slow moment of just going to the council and not being mistreated, but realizing that's not who I am. I can't just go back to acting like that's all I am when I know that I'm more. It's cool. It's cool to have him make that decision. And so, of course, this confrontation, his mind is made up. Ozai laughs at his moralizing and says, oh, yeah, you've been listening to Iroh. And this is where, Zuko is saying all the things that we kind of wish he could have realized sooner, which is, yes, I have been. And Iroh's been more of a father to me. And it's just this great moment where he gets to finally realize all of these things that we've seen for so long. And he says he plans to free Iroh from prison and beg for his forgiveness. And then, whether it was always part of the plan, it probably was, but he kind of keeps upping the ante because his father's not impressed. And finally says, I'm going to join the Avatar and help defeat you. And here's where we get to kind of a critical moment, which is interesting. Because Ozai says, why wait? If you're really going to work to destroy me, why not do it right now? You could just kill me right now while I'm powerless and you have your swords. And first of all, we saw that Azula was still pretty formidable even without her bending, so it's possible that Ozai would be too. I mean, we have no way to really know. We haven't seen him try. But Zuko at least seems confident that he could. And so what he says is that it is Aang's destiny to do that. And it's an interesting question because we could imagine that that's at least partly true, but Ozai says that he's afraid, and we can imagine that that's maybe partly true too. Because it's one thing to confront his dad and say, you've always been cruel, you never appreciated me, I think you're evil. It's one thing to say all these things, but it's another to kill your father in cold blood right there on the spot. You know, that's something, right? And so even as I think we can maybe believe that Zuko was at least partly afraid to do that, we can also, I think, see that that's a reasonable, understandable reaction for him to have. But then, as he's going to leave, Ozai baits him. Oh, you're only willing to confront me during the eclipse, but stay a little longer and I'll tell you what happened to your mother. Right? And so that's such a tough decision for Zuko because on the one hand, staying until his father has his firebending back is kind of dumb. But on the other hand, how can he resist finding out what happened to his mother? And so once again, we get a story from Ozai that, it's perhaps plausible, but we also know that Ozai, probably wouldn't be afraid to lie to Zuko if he felt like he should. But the story is interesting. And I think that, I feel like there's more understood about it than is actually said in the episode. Because, I was reading a recap after watching it, and it kind of went into more concrete detail than I feel like Ozai actually said in the episode. But in the gist of it, including the things kind of left unsaid and reading between the lines, is that when Iroh's son was killed in the battle, the previous battle at Ba Sing Se, and Ozai mocked how much grief he felt, the previous Fire Lord, Iroh and Ozai's father, Azulan, determined that, as punishment for mocking your brother's pain, you'll have to give up your own firstborn son. Which just goes to show that Azulan is also kind of a crazy person. On the one hand, punishing your son for mocking his brother's grief is yeah, okay. But as punishment to make him kill his own son? That seems not not a lot of parenting books would suggest that, I don't think. In any event, Zuko's mother didn't want Zuko to be killed either. And so, according to Ozai, she arranged for Azulan to die. And we don't know exactly how that happened. But while that meant that Ozai could become Fire Lord, I guess propriety meant that his wife had to be banished. We can't help but feel like there's some missing pieces to that story still, right, though? I mean, in any event, that's the story we're told, is that she was banished, which means she may be still alive somewhere. Of great interest to Zuko. But, of course, the price of hearing that story is that now the eclipse is over. And we get to, what TV tropes would call the crowning moment of awesome, I think, for Zuko, because as soon as we realize that the eclipse is over, Ozai just unleashes this really intimidating, scary torrent of lightning. He's basically going to kill his own son for his impudence and all of this, and it's really scary and upsetting because we, first of all, of what it means. It's a father trying to kill his son, but also just because that looks like, how could anyone deal with that. But as Zuko is driven back just by the sheer force of this lightning, we see him in a very specific pose, and we remember that's the pose that Iroh taught him and about redirecting lightning, and told him, you have to practice it really hard, but I won't let you test it by shooting lightning at you, because that's crazy, but you have to know it so that if it comes right down to it, you can use it when you have to. And he did. And so he takes the lightning from his father and redirects it back at him, and it's just like, that's so amazing! Yay, Zuko! And so his father's driven back, at least knocked on his ass, and kind of crashes into the mural, and it starts a fire back there. And so we see Ozai rising back up, furious that happened, but Zuko has taken that moment to escape. Oh, so great, so great! Oh man, it's such. First of all, obviously, this is a new phase in Zuko's story. But, like the whole series up to now, one of the main plots of it has been all about how Zuko, who started as this antagonist, was really not this bad guy. It was just that he was so stubbornly trying to still impress his awful father. And we kept seeing the good in him, just like Iroh did, and hoping that he would make the right choice. And then we saw him over and over again not make the right choice. And it was so heartbreaking all along. And finally, now he has definitively come to that conclusion himself, and he's going to do something about it. And that's great. But as a last little note of melancholy for him, when he goes to try to rescue Iroh so that he can beg for his forgiveness, he finds Iroh's already escaped on his own. And from the state of the guards, we can see now why Iroh would have told that one friendly guard to not be there. To not put her in a position of having to deal with that. So, yeah. So, no reunion from Zuko and Iroh in this episode, but Zuko got to tell his father off. He got to use Iroh's teaching in a moment of crisis. He got to zap his father with his own damn lightning, and then escaped. And he stole one of the smaller airships, and he's going to find Aang and help. And this is where we might remember, Aang still needs to learn firebending. Just saying. Oh, it's so great. So great. I mean, obviously this episode ends with kind of a massive defeat from the good guys. But with that moment of catharsis from Zuko, we still have hope. Anyway, so next week will be Season 3, Episode 12, which is called The Western Air Temple. And I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes. But one last parting note here is that in my other regular videos for the week earlier this week, I asked for feedback from people just to say, like, if you watch these, what else of my stuff do you consume? And I'm sure, no doubt in my mind, and people have told me that, there are people who watch my other videos but don't necessarily watch these rewatches just because maybe they don't care about the show. Obviously these videos are longer. But I'm really interested if you are watching these recaps. Is it possible that you watch these recaps and not the other videos? Do you consume any of my other stuff? I'm interested to hear from you if you do watch these. So in any event, I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.